Okay, hello everybody. My name is Molly, and I will be speaking about social media content planning and brainstorming. I have been attending DINFOS's social media conference for years and have always loved being an audience member, learning so much from the speakers and networking. So don't be a stranger. I will share my contact information at the end. And I am honored to have been invited to speak this year. And I hope that you get something from this. So let's get started. So I am Molly. Like I said, I was in the Marine, and my entire time in the Marine Corps, I was in on the Marine Corps social media team at the Pentagon. It was an experience of a lifetime. We got to travel all over and cover big events for the Marine Corps. We ran the Marine Corps' flagship social media platforms, and that included Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. We used to have a Vine when Vine was popular, um, Pinterest. So I have been immersed with social media for over 5 years now, and I have fallen in love with the combination of strategy and creativity. It's just a cool space to work in, very demanding. So kudos to all of you out there, doing what you do every day. We are in this together, and I am so excited to dive into this. After the Marine Corps, I worked at Booz Allen for a year and a half. Well, now over a year and a half. So I've taken everything I've learned from the Marine Corps, and I'm just continuing to learn and grow here at Booz Allen. It's been a really interesting journey. And I'm very excited to share with you guys some of the things I've learned while being at Booz Allen. Quick shout out to the Marine Corps Snapchat. That's why I have it here on this slide. The Marine Corps Snapchat was kind of my baby when I was on the Marine Corps team. I helped launch that platform, and we grew it over the years of my time on the team. We worked our way all the way up to getting the first ever military collaboration with headquarters Snapchat based in LA. And that was super fun. So if you have not checked out the Marine Corps Snapchat, you totally should add them. I am a little biased, even though I'm off that team now, but Marine Corps Snapchat's where it's at. Okay, so let's take a moment. I want everybody to just think about, what does content planning currently look like for you? What things are you doing? Are you doing anything? Because I know sometimes people look at content planning and it's hard. It's like this convoluted thing. How far are you supposed to plan out, and what does that look like? And it really does look different for everyone. So I just want you to reflect, where are you today with content planning on social media? I kind of want to share with you what my journey was like, when it came to content planning. So, who's familiar with the unfinished whiteboard? I realize I can't actually ask you guys questions, but I definitely have been familiar with the unfinished whiteboard. It's common, don't feel bad. So on the left, I have a picture of the calendar and the unfinished whiteboard. That is what content planning looked like in my mind in the Marine Corps. We spent a lot of our time making content and trying to stay, on the cutting edge. I think we did that really well. But one of the things I think we lacked was being strategic with our plan. We had a content calendar. Sometimes we'd break out a whiteboard and try to get fancy. But it really felt like we were just trying to race and keep up with everything. And it wasn't really strategic. Then when I got to Booz Allen, I started to realize how dimensional and strategic content planning really should be. You should be deliberate about what you're putting on your platforms. You should be deliberate about planning. And there's also all these tools that the industry has to offer. And that's one of the things I would love to harp on today is I believe, at least in my experience, there is a gap between these industry tools that other people are using, outside of the government space, outside of the military. So I really want to at least familiarize you guys with some of the things that are out there, some of the things that I discovered when I came to Booz Allen. And some of those things have really revolutionized the way that I've approached thinking about content planning on social media and actually, doing it. So I'm going to help try to bridge that gap. There's a lot of tools in this presentation. Some that cost money, some that are free. But I'm very confident that there's something in this presentation for everybody to at least consider and implement into what you're doing today. So first I want to describe or define customer experience. This is something that the team I'm on at Booz Allen, I'm aligned with the strategic innovation group, and we are focused on this customer experience. And this was kind of a foreign concept to me coming from the military, just because I feel like in the military space, we aren't thinking of our audience as customers. At least where I came from, we weren't thinking about them as customers. We weren't selling anything, so why are they customers? So I just want to backtrack a little bit. Just think of customers as a loose word. A customer isn't necessarily someone who's even buying something. You know, it's a consumer. It's somebody you're trying to sell on who you are, whether they're actually making a purchase or not. So I think it's beneficial to kind of understand what customer experience really is and sort of try to apply that to what you're doing. So obviously defining customer experience, it's the impression that your customers or your consumers or your audience have of your brand as a whole throughout the aspect of their journey. So social media is one touch point of their journey. Maybe they're going to your website. Maybe their experience is what they're actually experience on a day-to-day basis. And you know, for other brands, it's a storefront, stuff like that. We don't have to worry about storefronts, but social media is very much a part of this total experience. So it is very, very important, and just zooming out and understanding how that fits into the total experience. So speaking of social media, we like to take this customer experience approach to social media. So this very fancy wheel is our operational practices, our customer experience operational practices. We have experts that span each one of these practices and even more. And some of our projects, you know, employ every single practice with a lot of people in each. Some of our practices only have a few employees on them who are kind of going through this cycle, you know, more individually. But I just like to put this here to show you this is a total experience, and a lot of these aspects, you know, measurement, research, design, implementing, support, engagement, they all kind of work together. So this is our framework here at Booz Allen, and social media falls a part of this wheel. Now, when we talk about marketing, we have some teams at Booz Allen, you know, that are focusing on, you know, a total marketing project that includes website development, website service, website measurement, social media, everything. They're rebranding, UX strategy, a lot of things. We have a lot of experts that do it all, which is great. But when you think of marketing, it is a big effort. And these are the principles that we like to apply to our marketing efforts. And just to harp on this, social media is, as we know, it's a part of marketing. It's not every aspect of marketing, but it's a part of marketing. So these principles should also apply to what you're doing on social media. And maybe your principles look different, but these are ours, and I wanted to share. So the first, you know, establishing your brand promise. This is the foundation of your relationship. It's setting those expectations. Who are you? What are you about? What can someone expect from you? And then it comes to building the relationship. You want to create a long-term relationship. You want to create that loyalty. It's important that people come to you for their news. It's important that they come back to you. It's important that they're getting what they need from you. And then lastly, build these experiences together. We know that relationships are not a one-way street. And that is the beauty of social media, because it's allowed us to interact with our audience and not just blast things on a television and hope that they got the message. It's a very responsive platform, and that's really the power of it. So, you know, you want to listen and incorporate that feedback and engage, you know. So these very much apply to social media and marketing as a whole. So I wanted to put these here to remind you, zoom out, figure out what those principles are for you and your organization or your unit, and make your social media mission fit in with those as well. And this slide is just to expand upon how our customer experience, our operational practices apply to building a marketing campaign. I'm not going to go through every single bullet here, but this is how we sort of take our framework and apply it to building a marketing campaign. Like I said, social media is one part of marketing. I feel like I'm going to repeat that a million times. So it doesn't necessarily cross every single one of these practices, but it's a part of this process. It's a part of the pie. And I think it's, again, really good to understand, how it fits in, and where, where it is in perspective of the whole. Feel free to screenshot this if you want to, dive in a little bit deeper to some of these bullets and how we, you know, apply these to everything. So now that I gave you some background on Booz Allen, our structure, customer experience, we're going to dive into how to approach content planning. And there's a few things to consider when you are planning content on social media. The first thing I think that's always really good to do before you even dive into the weeds of planning is conducting a profile audit. Now, for those of you who are who have a regular analytics checkup, or maybe you have regular reports, maybe this isn't as important for you. But I still think even if you're regularly looking at your numbers, it might be good to just take an operational pause, do a deep dive into your numbers, and really look at what's performing well. That includes, looking at your top X posts, top 5, top 10, what makes sense for you? Are there any trends? What topic are those posts? And, figuring out like your overall profile performance, which profiles are performing the best, which profiles aren't doing so well. Is there anything that you need to switch up? Are there some platforms that don't make sense for you anymore and you should just sort of stray away from putting so much effort into them and focusing more on something else? All of this can be derived obviously from your numbers. And as you know, as social media managers, those numbers can be found on your native platforms, which is amazing. But if you have a third-party tool, even better. All of your numbers should be in one place, and maybe this process is very quick for you. Either way, it does behoove you to really take a dive into your analytics. Everything starts from here, understanding what has gone out on your platform and what has done well. The other thing to consider is your posting cadence. So this is very team contingent. So what is manageable for you? It's going to depend on how many people are on your team. How much content are you able to make? Are you relying on other sources for content? Are they making content? Is a pandemic happening and all of a sudden everything changes because you're not out in the field shooting? There's so many factors that come into this, so there's no one size fits all. The biggest thing to remember here is you should never, never sacrifice quality over quantity. Now, that being said, there's going to be some posts that aren't as good as others. That's the nature of the beast. But what I'm saying is if you start to feel like you're forcing content to meet a benchmark, you're doing it wrong. And that might be a hot take, but you really want to be pleasing your audience. And if you keep putting stuff out that's not making them happy and they don't like it, they're just going to stop following you. They might even unfollow you. And we know how the algorithms work. You don't want to do that. So it really matters what you're putting out. And I would argue that if you have to take your posting schedule and even cut it in half, but that means you can focus more on each singular post, great, do that. And maybe it's even less for you. You need to manage your resources, and that's for you to decide. And like I have this sample screenshot here, you can see 3 days a week on Facebook, alternating every other day on Instagram. This is a suggestion. But this just allows you not to feel like you are required to post every single day on every platform. That is not manageable for most people, especially in the military where we don't have, big teams to work with. So figure out what's manageable for you. But the last point I really want to make here is consistency does matter. So I know some people are just like, well, if we don't have content, we're not going to post. That's fair because you don't want to post garbage. But you also want to try to establish a rhythm because your customers, or I'm sorry, your audience, your consumers, whatever you want to call them, they're expecting you to deliver. And if all of a sudden you go dark, it does hurt your numbers and it's going to hurt that relationship you're trying to build. So you definitely don't want to sacrifice consistency here. Another thing to consider is diversifying your content across different channels. In a perfect world, we would be able to post something different to every single platform. We would be able to make a unique experience on Facebook, a unique experience on Instagram, and vice versa. Like we really want to cater to the platform's strengths and stay away from different weaknesses and try to get away from this mindset of we're posting the same thing to all of our platforms, because that is not how it should go. So back to the posting cadence, if you're able to switch things up, you can really focus on, we are making a Facebook post, not a social media post. You're making a platform specific post. The other thing I want to call out here, I just listed some of these key features, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but like, for example, Facebook groups. Facebook groups has always been a thing, but in the last couple of years, they've grown to have a lot of popularity. So that's something to consider when it comes to your content plan. Okay, I know Facebook groups are really popular. Right now, we are not posting in any Facebook groups. Right now, we don't have a Facebook group. Maybe you make an exclusive group for whatever your unit. Whatever it is, it's understanding these platforms, understanding their strengths, and playing to their strengths. With Instagram, there's a lot of research behind Reels. They're really pushing Reels because TikTok has changed the game yet again when it comes to video footage or video content. So, it's things like that. Maybe you can't be on TikTok for other reasons, but you're putting TikTok content on Instagram, and obviously we understand how Twitter works. It's more news curated and you can post more there. And, there's other cool things like there's polls and, there's a bunch of stuff you can do on each platform is what I'm trying to say. So in a perfect world, you'll be able to cater your content to each platform. And when you consider your posting cadence and you kind of like maybe scale back on some of the effort, you can really dive deeper into these niched efforts. And I encourage you to consider some of that when you're planning your content. Now, this uses and gratifications theory, this is something I learned from the Marine Corps social media team. Our director would talk to us about this all the time. What this boils down to is, do you like what you're creating? And I want to expand upon that because obviously everyone's different. Like maybe you don't necessarily love what you're making, this one message, but you know that a certain part of your audience is going to love it. Fine. I'm not trying to say you personally need to love everything that you're making because you're not creating it for you. You're creating it for your audience. And your audience has different needs. So that is pretty much the uses and gratifications theory in a nutshell. Some of these theories have a list of needs. It's not just 4, it's like 6 or 5 or 10. I like to use this because I think this is a simplified version. So just to walk you through it, your audience has a need. One of those needs is surveillance, identity, relationships, diversion. Surveillance is the need to acquire knowledge. Personal identity is the need to feel like you belong. Personal relationships is the need to have that social interaction. And diversion is the need to escape from reality, which I know we all need this last year and a half. So you have these needs. You go on social media, you're seeking to meet one of those needs. The media that you have consumed, does it meet your need? Do you feel like one of those needs have been met? And if you have, then you're more likely to come back and keep wanting to interact and consume that content. So really try and understand, why are people on social media in the first place? Why are they here? Why are they at my page? Why do they like what I do? And understanding those needs and trying to match your content to those needs will help you a lot. Package content. This is another big one. This is fun. So we all know, I think we all know as social media managers, I hope at least, what a social media campaign is. It's a packaged campaign. It usually is recurring, or maybe it spans a certain quarter of the year. Maybe it's one time, maybe it happens every year, every Black History Month, every, summer safety, stuff like that. Those are like campaign opportunities. The best thing about a campaign is it naturally feels like packaged. It's a little bow on this content. It's all one thing that relates to each other. People like that. They understand that. It makes sense to them. One social media campaign that's amazing, and this is an industry example, this was years back. I always like to bring this up, but REI, an outdoor brand I'm sure many of you are aware of, started a campaign called Opt Outside. And their campaign, they had this idea of Black Friday, close their stores, let's start this, opt outside thing, trying to encourage users to go outside. It was so popular that it literally never ended. They intended it for just to be a seasonal thing, and now it's a campaign, and it's like a landmark of their brand. So there's much to say about social media campaigns, and there's definitely an art to them. The Marine Corps, we did something called Moto Monday. We did top shots every week. So there's a lot of opportunity to figure out, how can we package our content together and make it this experience for our audience? And then the other thing is user-generated content. REI's Opt Outside started as a social media campaign and it turned into user-generated content. People were using the hashtag and REI started to feature people's photos that were using the Opt Outside hashtag. That is what user-generated content is. It's content created by the people, not for the people. And people love that because it's getting them involved with your brand. It gets them excited. They have this opportunity to be featured on your page. So I think there's really something to say about featuring your people, your audience's content. It'll get some excitement and people talk about that. Gets them amped. So I definitely encourage exploring how you can, start a campaign and with user-generated content. Okay, so now we're going to talk about connecting your content plan to your content strategy. So content strategy is a little bit different than content planning. Content strategy is more of like, it kind of ties back to your marketing principles that we talked about. These are your foundational aspects of your unit, your brand, whatever you're trying to do. That's your foundational strategy. And then all of your content should fit into that strategy somewhere. Now, this is an example. This is an industry strategy. It was coined by YouTube for YouTube, but I think this is something that applies to the social media. I think a social media content strategy as well. So I'm going to break this down a little bit more for you. So the hero hub content or hero hub hygiene. So hero content is like your big ticket items. This is, it's going to impact a lot of people. It's going to reach a lot of people. Maybe this is your holiday video. Maybe this is your one summer safety video that you've spent a lot of time planning for. This is your big ticket stuff. Maybe you do it once a quarter. Maybe you have enough bandwidth to make hero style content once a month. Very team contingent, but these are your big ticket items that are going to be far reaching. Your hub content is one step below that. So it's still like regularly scheduled posts, but there's like another level of effort there. Maybe it's not your everyday posts, but it's like a weekly thing. Maybe this is where your campaign falls in. Maybe this is where Moto Monday sits and Top Shot sits. And then your hygiene content is your everyday content. Again, I use everyday with quotes because maybe you're not posting every day, but this is your easy content. This is the very little effort content. This is the content that can kind of be recycled and reused. It should be the stuff that's easy to come by. And I put the pink arrow there across hero and hub because the hero and hub content requires far more planning, especially hero. Sometimes your hub content doesn't require that much planning once you're up and running. But if you're trying to create this new campaign, this new idea, you want something new, and it might fall in the hub category, it's going to still require some upfront planning. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. We're going to spend the most time here because this is what's really important. These campaigns, your hero content is important. It's defining. This is what your brand is about. This is what your unit is all about. So that is what we're going to talk about. How do you approach planning content for that? And I am pitching to you that you should apply some design thinking strategies to help you plan this. And we're going to get right into that. Design thinking plus content planning. Here's the fun stuff. So design thinking is a research process, essentially. So we're sort of existing in our O2 practice, customer research and synthesis. And design thinking, defined, is a human-centered approach to innovation that draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and their requirements for business success. This is quoted by Tim Brown. He is the executive of IDEO, and IDEO is a leading organization that sort of has coined design thinking and just shaping the field of design thinking. So highly encourage you to check out IDEO if you want to learn more about design thinking. But essentially, you're putting the person at the center of the problem or the opportunity. You want to put them first and always think to them. And really where it flourishes is on this divergent and convergent thinking methodology. And we're going to get deeper into this in the next slide, but diverging is like you're creating all the choices, all the options are at play. And converging is like you're scaling down to what's possible and what makes sense. So here's another little graphic to explain it more. The military very used to thinking is very used to using convergent thinking. So we're used to using logic. We don't want to, it's not that we don't want to, but it's harder to get creative in a space where we feel like it's not always going to be equipped in that same way. I don't know if that's the best way to say that, but we are just not used to being super uber creative in a lot of the military and government systems. So we're very tied to convergent thinking using our logic. Divergent thinking, like I talked about, is where you're creating choices, you're getting creative, you're casting the wide net, and it's a very nice space to, or it's a nice strategy to use to come up with ideas. Lateral thinking uses both convergent and divergent thinking. So lateral thinking is critical to successful content planning. You want to use both, and that really is the crux of design thinking. So this is our design thinking that we use here at Booz Allen. This is a process that is meant to be continuous. You go through it once, but it's not like a one and done thing. You're supposed to be consistently going through this because, we are evolving creatures, our habits and behaviors are constantly changing. Social media is constantly changing. So this is a nice framework to sort of guide you through this process, but it should be a continuous or regularly occurring process to make sure you're staying, on the cutting edge. And I want you to think of this process centered around the creative content meeting. I'm confident that many of us in the social media management space are having creative content brainstorms, especially if you're on a bigger team. If you're not, I understand. It's like, how do you have a brainstorm session with 2 people? You can still have one, I'd argue, but I know it's harder. But for those of you who have content creative brainstorms, I had them when I was on the Marine Corps social media team. I want you to think about it surrounded by that event. The biggest thing is all this pre-work here that you see. We have framing the problem, we're immersing ourselves in research here. This is where we're diverging, and then we're synthesizing, converging here, and then we come to our ideate phase, and then we're again diverging because we're creating different options here. We're creating the videos, we're creating the media, and then we go to iterate. Here at the end. So, here's the pre-content brainstorm. This is content production, all centered around this key event here of the brainstorming session. When I was in the Marine Corps, we didn't do much research. I mean, we did some, but it wasn't as exhaustive as I think it could have been. Limited resources, not a ton of people to help facilitate that. So I understand there's some constraints here. But I sort of wish I knew what I knew now, because there's a ton here. There's so much potential here. And the more work you do before your creative brainstorming session, the better your content will be. I mean, literally every single time. So it is not a waste of time to research and spend a lot of time in that phase. And you can see you're spending a ton of time here in the immerse phase, and you're spending the second most amount of time here in prototyping, actually creating. So, I'd argue that researching is just as important as the creation phase. I wanted to just break this down a little further to show you how this applies to content planning specifically. So, here we have frame. We're outlining the problem or our opportunity. And then we're immersing. We're immersing ourselves in research. We're researching audiences, conversations, trends. And then we're synthesizing our research. And then we're ideating here at our content creation brainstorm. And then we're creating campaign materials where maybe we're testing them if we're lucky. And then we're launching the campaigns and measuring or content, whatever it is. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm only going to discuss these first 4 phases: frame, immerse, synthesize, and ideate. I just don't have enough time to talk about creating the content and iterating it. And frankly, that's separate from content planning. So here we are, the frame. So this is where you're exploring your problem or your opportunity. This is the first phase. And, this is where, are you building out a whole new content plan? Are you trying to create a campaign? Are you planning your big summer safety video? This is where you're framing your problem. Here's some questions that you should consider. The biggest thing here is just understanding what your intention is. What's your intended outcome? What's your goal? What is your why? And figuring out what the best way to go about that is. Are you trying to achieve one thing? Are you trying to achieve multiple? Should you split that out if you have multiple goals? Can you combine some things? That's really understanding your mission here, framing that. And then you want to understand your scope, your organizational context, and then how you're going to measure success. And this one's a really important one, but we'll get there. So, define your requirements. How big is this effort? What resources do you need? And then understanding what factors in your organization are going to influence you. Do you have a long, lengthy approval process? Does this video or does this content need to be seen by the general? What resources do you need to acquire? What limitations do you have? And then last, but definitely not least, how are you going to measure the success of this? This is critical because, again, if you're going to put all this effort into this, you want to know how you're going to measure something and how you're going to report that and show your leadership or even yourself, if you don't have to report to your leadership, was it all worth it? We went through all this crap. Was it worth it? So those are some things that you should consider and think about when you're in the frame mindset. So what tools to use? Big thing here is tools plus people. These tools are not good without the human interaction with it. So on the left, I have some tools to suggest. Miro and Mural, very similar. It's like a visual collaboration board. There's a lot of tools there. We can get deeper into that. I'm going to show you Mural later on in the presentation, but these are great tools to collaborate virtually. You can also use these tools if you're collaborating in person, but just have something up on a screen or something. Mentimeter, another tool I'm going to show you in the presentation later on. This is an awesome one to just sort of kickstart things and get some feedback from your whole group if you have a bigger team. And then on the right, we have the people, the in-person sessions. These are also great. They're doing it very traditionally with the Post-it notes and stuff like that. That's all fun, and it's just nice to get your team involved. This type of session should not just be a stale discussion at a table or phone call discussion. You want to get your people involved and make them feel like they have ownership over this problem. Again, human-centered design. While we're creating for our audience, we too are people. So making this collaborative and fun is just as important to make sure you're going to maximize the products you're coming up with and the ideas you're creating. Okay, so now we're in the immerse phase. Again, that this phase is one of the longest phases. Successful content is rooted in intimately understanding your audience, their needs, and industry trends. So that's what we're trying to do here. We want to understand the platforms, what's changing about them, what's doing well, and then understanding your niche market. Who's your audience? What are they saying? What do they like? What do they want to see? All of these things are important. So I'm going to show you this two-phased approach because I think these are the critical things to understand when thinking about content. So one, knowing the social media industry. These are formal sources that I think are amazing and definitely worthwhile to check in every once in a while. Pew, Statista, I think that's how you say it, Forrester. These are all great tools. They're free. There are some paid versions. By no means do you need to pay. Of course, if people are willing to, you're going to get way more information, and it's nice to get that extra information because some of their research and their studies are locked, and for good reason. It takes a lot of time and effort and money to fund these studies. But there's still a considerable amount of free content on here. You can subscribe to, I think they have newsletters for updates. So, it makes it really easy. You just subscribe to the letters, you'll get some emails, and it's worthwhile to scroll and read things that are relevant to you and your mission. Understanding the social media tools. If you're trying to invest in a digital listening tool or a social media management tool, Forrester is a great resource for that. And then Pew and Statista are great for those studies and understanding digital usage trends. And then there's this other part, you're still getting to know the industry, but from a more informal perspective. And this is still just as important, if not more important, because these are from people who are doing the same thing that we're doing. So social media today is a great one. This is where you can get some platform updates. They'll talk to you about some algorithm changes, and some higher up people in the field are helping generate these articles. So it's always nice to see like what new features are coming and what they're testing, which is fun. Socially Sorted and the Daily Carnage are even more informal than social media today, but it's just nice because they give you some ideas, they give you some content trends. The Daily Carnage is one I found recently, and I love it because it's very entertaining. It's kind of like a news bulletin, how you can get email summaries of the news if you subscribe to an organization that does that. The Daily Carnage does that, but it's for social media. And it's just fun. It's really funny and interactive. So I highly recommend the Daily Carnage, and you'll still learn a bunch, which is nice. All right, so this is kind of an example of a couple of things. I wanted to pull some research from Pew on the right. So Pew has done these studies over the last, 10 years now, and it's nice to see the trend. As you can see, YouTube has popularized a ton in the last couple of years. And where Facebook, while it's still a leading platform, it's just plateaued. Just good to know, when considering your strategy and what effort you're putting. Instagram has had some steady growth, nothing like we see with YouTube, but still, it's growing a little bit better than Facebook has. And then, TikTok low on the list, as we know, it just came out, but still worthwhile to consider. These are the most downloaded apps of 2020. TikTok number 2, obviously second to Zoom. Um, and I know the restrictions around TikTok, I get it. Many people can't even launch a TikTok for a lot of reasons, but it's still important to know that this is on the board and it's coming. It's up and coming, and there's a lot, it's changing the landscape. Even though it's low on the list, TikTok is changing the social media game, as we all know. Um, and then this top graph here shows the demographic groups and which platforms they're on. This is nice because sometimes it's hard to find demographic data on the platforms. They just don't offer that for a lot of ethical reasons. But with this sample size study, Pew has offered a little insight to where different groups of people are. So if that's relevant to you, just wanted to give a little push to Pew, because some of these resources can offer you research that you're not getting on the platforms. Here's another one I wanted to point out. This is daily active users for Instagram stories. This is from Statista, and it shows literally a steady increase. Instagram stories has become very popular. People like the idea of this limited time experience, and if they don't indulge in stories, that they miss something. So this is a trend that a lot of experts are saying is just going to continue to develop, this idea of this, temporary content being such a craze. So definitely something to consider when planning content, utilizing those tools. From the inside out, here's a big one. If you can't do anything else, I think that this one is a place where I've learned probably the most. So Facebook groups. We all know, like I said earlier, they're popularizing. I have learned so much from Facebook groups. This is one that I actually am in. I'm in Social Media Managers group. It's amazing. There's 50,000 members. When I have a question that I can't really get the answer to myself, or I just don't have the bunch of time to research, I just go to this group and I type in the question and someone answers me almost immediately. This is nice because I'm sure you all are a part of military-centric groups, military public affairs, or Air Force public affairs. It can get very specific. Maybe there's a unit page. But this is nice to make your net wider and think about, there are social media managers across all types of industries. And we're all experiencing some of the same stuff sometimes. So that's a great group to join. And then there's also industry specific groups. So that's more of like, again, your unit pages. Maybe your page is more about, SAPR, sexual assault in the military. So you want to join a sexual assault group or something. This is more focused on what your actual mission is. So joining these groups is really nice because you can get a pulse of what people are saying. And the last plug I'll say here is a lot of these digital listening tools, we're going to talk about them later on in this presentation, they can't tap into groups because groups are closed forums. So because they're private forums, the only way that you'll get those insights is if you join them. So I know it can get annoying sometimes, but it really does pay off to be on the inside. Get the inside scoop, All right, get to know trends. This is big because you want to know what's trending. Best way to know what's trending is just use the platforms yourself. I'm not saying that's the only way, because some of those other resources like Daily Carnage, they'll tell you kind of what's trending and what's popular and what's doing well. But really, it's going to come when you use the platform. So I definitely hope that the most, majority of social media users in the audience, or managers in the audience, are also users. And then you want to implement those trends where it makes sense. No stretches. Don't try to make it work when it's just a huge awkward stretch, because we've all seen that before and it's just weird. But here's just a couple of things I wanted to highlight. Just the 16 most popular videos on YouTube. Like I showed you before, YouTube is increasing in popularity a ton. I feel like in the military community, we kind of look at YouTube as just this like storage platform. We kind of look at it as like a second Divids. Maybe it's a step above Divids and we only put really good content there. But like, I feel like a lot of us just look at it as, oh, it's like a Divids for videos. Fair, that's fair. But really understanding the platform and why it's popular and what people are using for it. The biggest one I would say is how-to videos. Like, people are always searching how-to videos on YouTube. So what can you provide there that, can maybe help your YouTube get a boost? I think that that's really important to consider. Next is content trends can cross platforms. This is a big thing, like I've been saying with TikTok. Maybe you can't be on TikTok. In fact, these pointing videos originated on TikTok, but they also exist on Instagram. I have also seen them on Facebook, crazy enough. So it's just good to know that, maybe a trend that's starting on TikTok will come to Instagram or is already there, or Facebook, vice versa. And like this example, I always like to think like, okay, instead of making a boring training video of like, hey guys, do your training, maybe you make it fun and put it to music and like make someone point to all the trainings that they have to take and then make it funny at the end or something. There's a lot you can do. And user generated content, not going to harp on this because we talked about it before, but get your audience involved. It will pay off. Now we're going to move on to understanding the niche market. So this is an example of a product of what we've developed at Booz Allen with a lot of time, money, and resources. We developed these personas for the VA, and this was a huge effort. So we leverage different technology and different human-centered methodologies to go beyond the numerical insights. We really wanted to find the person, and this sort of helped the VA shape their solutions to cater to these different personas in their audience. It really comes down to the more you know about the audience, the better you're going to do. So you want to find out as much as you can. You want to intimately know your audience. And the benefit in the military community, at least, is oftentimes we are part of the audience. If you're an enlisted service member or an officer and you're working on these unit pages, you're part of the target audience. So you're already halfway there. But if you're not, get as close to the audience as you can. These are some of the methodologies we use to get close to the audience and conduct this research. Not going to go through all of them, but just to show you the amount of depth that it takes to get to a product like I just showed you, it's a lot. We do one-on-one interviews, surveys, focus groups. It's a lot. And really, like I said, it comes down to the closer you are to the source, the richer your insights are. So lots of different methods here. But if you don't have the money to do that or the time to conduct one-on-one surveys, most of us don't, I'm going to show you some consumer research without the drawbacks. It's a lot more cost effective. You've got real-time data. It's not outdated, large sample sizes. And what is that fancy solution? Digital listening. And I actually think there's another talk at the DINFOS conference this year about digital listening specifically. So I'm going to kind of try to breeze through these slides because I'm not here to sell you on digital listening, but I hope that these slides give you a little bit of insight on the power of these tools. I could talk about these tools at length with you, but I just want to give you a little snapshot of them. So this is like our practice and the steps that we go through. I'm not going to go through them, screenshot if you want. Really what digital listening does is it helps you answer these questions. What are your people saying? What do they like? How do they feel? Who's saying these things? Who else do they care about? How do we reach them? You get so much information from these tools. And these questions a lot of times are what we're asking most. And you can find the answers using digital listening. The tools that we leverage is Meltwater Explore and Meltwater Audience. Explore is used for conversation analysis, and Audience is used for audience insights. So Meltwater Explore, this is the traditional listening tool. You create the Boolean search. The Boolean, what a Boolean is for those that don't know, is those and or statements, and sometimes you include not. So you create this string, and then you put it in the system and you search. Meltwater Explorer searches across tons of news sites, social media, to include Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, Pinterest, Reddit. They look at message boards, they look at reviews. So they're analyzing all this data at once and synthesizing it for you. They have, they'll give you a little bit of insight on sentiment. They'll get you top keywords, top topics, and you can actually click into the conversations and read more. So if you want to understand the negative side of the conversation, you can click into that and explore all of that conversation right there in one place. There's automated reports. You can schedule out emails. We don't really recommend that on our team. We like the human mind is still very important with this tool because there is a level of error with artificial intelligence. So it is really important to have a human behind the tool, but especially if you're going to invest in a tool like this, you want, some human reporting behind it. But there is also automated reporting, competitive benchmarking, really cool stuff you can do with the tool. Here's just a sampling of kind of the stuff that you can get. I used a military Boolean string. You can see it on the left there. I just wanted to understand the military branches and mental health. What are all of the military branches saying about mental health? You get total mentions, you can adjust the date range, you get a sampling of the actual articles on the side, Twitter accounts mentions per day, sentiment, the conversation tracking across, the whole time period, keywords, and there's even more, but those are the ones I wanted to highlight for you guys. And this is like a zoom in on the conversation analysis with some of these call outs here. And as you can see, some of them you're like, okay, those aren't related. If you click into the article, you can read more and realize, see how they are related, but sometimes they're not related. The system, like I said, does have some flaws. So this is like what we like to show and say, you definitely want a human analyst or somebody in the tool, pretty frequently to actually be using it. Because if you just hit scheduled reporting, some of these things are going to come through and you're going to be like, this isn't helping us at all. When in reality it is. You have to actually go in and do some, self-analysis. If you can't invest in a tool like that, I definitely recommend Google Trends and Alerts. I'm sure many of you are aware of this, but this is kind of like your next best free option. You can schedule alerts. The only downside to this is it's not all inclusive. You're not going to get all the social media data that you would with another tool. So, there is something to say about a digital listening tool that is more inclusive of the conversation. But if you can't afford that, totally understand it. I encourage you to check out Google Trends and Alerts. Now into audience insights. This tool is awesome. There's different ways you can curate an audience. You can curate it based on terms, hashtags, specific URLs, people who are using your website URL or whatever. You can curate it based on a handle. This is only for Twitter though, so that is the one downside. You can upload your audience, you can create a search, and then you'll come across this dashboard, super fancy dashboard, all clickable. But it offers you a ton of information, key influencers segmented out by, different segments that they automate for you, key influencers, top keywords in their bio, their demographic breakdown. It even gets into personality traits and how they consume their content, which I'll show you here on the next slide, a little bit deeper dive. I did an active or reserve audience. You can see the handles I used on the left here if you're interested. But some of the information that they offer, which is cool, relevant media formats, some key demographics, top brands. You can have a list there. You can see all the influencers. There's an exhaustive list there, content sources, networks, and how likely they are to use ones. This is nice to inform wow, our audience loves Reddit and they loved LinkedIn, but Instagram is their lowest on the list. Why are we spending all our time on Instagram? We should switch. This is just an awesome tool to help inform some of those decisions. Personality analysis, one of my favorite aspects of this tool. You can see their needs, their choices are driven by a desire for organization, which makes a lot of sense in the military. You can look into their personality, you can compare them. This is the comparative analysis here. This is the darker color is our military audience and the lighter color is to a general US audience. So you can kind of see how they compare to the general population. You can also switch your comparisons, side-by-side analysis. Here I did Army versus Navy, and they're literally almost identical, which is funny. But this is not comparing to the US audience, it's comparing Army and then the Navy. And you can just see how they compare with their values, their interests, devices, how they, what's driving their purchase decisions. I know that's not as relevant to us, but it's still really cool information to have, and it might be relevant to the select few of you guys in the audience. Now we're to synthesize. Going to breeze through this here because synthesize, I put a lot of information here in the slide. The way you synthesize your information is up to you. It can look a lot of different ways. It can be way fancier than this. It can be as basic as bullets, but you want to take all the research you just conducted and synthesize it. There's no point in conducting all this research if you're not coming to that synthesis phase. So whichever way makes the most sense for you, it will look different for everybody, but I just created this bulleted list to synthesize some information. Next, we're in the ideate phase. This is what we're taking everything we learned in the immersion phase, and then, synthesis obviously makes it pretty and understandable. We're taking those takeaways and helping it drive our ideas. This is, again, we're diverging again. We're going into hyper creativity mode. So some tools I want to pitch to you here. This tool is Mentimeter. It's awesome. There's a free version. This is just a cool way to survey your audience and get everyone involved. There's different formats you can use. This is like the one word or few word responses. You can have long form answers. You can make it private. Lots of options here that I encourage you to check out and kind of survey your audience and get them excited when it comes to brainstorming. The next one is Mural. I'm going to play it without sound in the background. Mural, like I said, collaboration board, so awesome. There is a free trial for Mural. Otherwise, it's paid. It's really not that expensive, though. Miro, M-I-R-O, is a free version of a tool like this. I don't think it's as robust as Mural, but it's just a really great way to do this in a virtual space. Even if you are collaborating in person, which I know is ideal, this is still cool because a lot of your pre-work can be done on this in this space. Maybe you come to the creative meeting and you have a board started and you're not just like sitting in a room like, what do we do? You have something, you have a starting point. That's a great way to document ideas and document things all in one place. Share it with people. Love this tool. Definitely worthwhile to check out. So you have your content plan, you go to the creative meeting, you're using these cool tools, you did all this research, you have the plan. But organizing and following your plan is a whole other animal. And unfortunately, that is a whole other presentation that I'm not going to dive into here. But I do have one suggestion for you, and it's Trello. So I don't know how many people know Trello, but this is a great tracking process. And I love it. There's a free version that you can get with this. You can create multiple boards, collaborate with people in one place. It's just nice to know exactly where the content is flowing in, pre-production, production, editing, first round of edits, whatever it is, scheduling. You want to know where the item is in the process. So I just recommend Trello. I'm not going to go into any other tools because I realize organizing and tracking and all of those things, very, very team contingent. Your team looks different than everyone else's team. So you have to sort of come up with those solutions and research what is best. But I did want to harp on organizing and creating that plan is just as important as the plan itself. You want to put some time and effort into figuring out how it makes sense, making sure that it's organized and tracked. So your work is not going to get lost in the process. So that's all I have for you guys today. Like I said, I've been an attendee for this conference for years. I love it, and I really especially love the networking part of this. So if you have any questions or anything at all, I'm always happy to talk. We can connect on LinkedIn. You can feel free to send me an email. But I would love to keep the conversation going. And yeah, I hope that something was helpful for you in this presentation, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the DINFOS conference. Thank you.